Hey everyone, we're back in the elements. We're hoping that the wind is not going to be too loud. It's been a little windy. Likewise, you might hear some cars going by, and some people have been walking by, okay? So I'm just warning you ahead of time. Okay, so I'm still thinking about COVID, but I'm thinking of it from another angle, somewhat of a ecological, economic way having to do with overpopulation, okay? So we hear this argument, and by the way, I'm going to be offering you more detailed instructions on D2L, etc., for the week to see how we could work through these ideas, okay? So, and they'll be in light of working through the final essay. So we have the problem of that the pandemic has imposed on the economy, okay, and caused millions of people to be out of work to the degree that we have a lot of people who are upset and want to get back to work sooner than later, right? How long are we going to wait? We want to get back to work. What do we do, right? And so this has presented this odd situation where people might feel pressured to start theorizing that, well, if we get back to work sooner, we might have to sacrifice the small percentage of people who contract the virus, right? This is a problem, right? This is an ethical problem because you're like, well, wait a minute, that doesn't make sense. But yet it doesn't make sense because we think that that sacrificing the life of any person in the name of the economy is not a good idea. So think about it that way. So once again, this is not my argument. I don't think that people are expendable. But you hear this idea that the people getting back to work sooner than later is a better option than the caution, the over caution we might take. Someone might see our reaction to the pandemic as an overreaction, thus causing them to be out of a job. And so there's a pressure to get back to work so that we could have a healthy economy. And likewise, are we willing to sacrifice a number of lives to do that? Okay, so this bizarre reasoning, but yet somewhat controversial reasoning has me thinking of a paper of Garrett Hardin's from 1968 titled "A Tragedy of the Commons," right? And then so I'm going to talk about Garrett Hardin and then also Lynn Ostrom. Okay, so Garrett Hardin wrote the paper in 1968. What did he mean by tragedy of the commons? Let's break that down really quick. First, tragedy has to do with his reference to the philosopher Alfred North Whitehead, where we have this quote, "The essence of dramatic tragedy is not unhappiness. It resides in the remorseless working of things," right? So the remorseless working of things, easiest way to think about it in terms of how Garrett Hardin is thinking here is that the remorseless working of things has to do with overpopulation, overtaking the finite resource of the finite resources of the planet Earth. Okay, in the name of better environment, we need to get a handle on overpopulation. So this is a neo-Malthusian argument. So Malthus was working in the late 18th century, late 19th century, where he was thinking that overpopulation grows exponentially, or population grows exponentially, whereas finite resource grows arithmetically, okay? And so, in other words, the exponential growth will go faster than the arithmetic growth, and so there's going to be depletion of the finite resource. What do we do? Is this sustainable, right? So Garrett Hardin is putting this into question because we can think of this as a competition for a common, the common resource, the common finite resources that the world offers us. That, in other words, overpopulation is going to overtake this. What do we do, right? So, and what we do for Hardin is revise our conscientiousness, okay? So in other words, if we're revising our conscientiousness, in terms of overpopulation, Garrett Hardin's proposal is that there's the problem of people on welfare, for example, okay, where people on welfare, remember he was working back in 1968 under not under the Johnson administration, but during the Johnson administration, where work on poverty was quite was in the air. And so this work on poverty also is connected to overpopulation. In other words, poor people on welfare have families, and when they are on welfare, they are using finite resources, and so the reevaluation of our conscientiousness is such that we need to ask ourselves, are we being too compassionate with these people, okay, that enable them to deplete the finite resource, okay? So he has this awful quote, freedom to breed is intolerable, which you start getting a gist of his conservative vantage there, okay? So question is that he's having a problem of sustainability. In other words, the commons, which are the finite resource of Earth, needs to either be privatized or it needs to be governmentally distributed. In other words, the finite resource is, in terms of overpopulation, is not sustainable. Okay, so we need to have a reevaluation for Hardin of our conscientiousness. Okay, so I'm going to have you do some work on that, and then now I want you to draw attention to Lynn Ostrom. Okay, so Lynn Ostrom won. She was the first woman to win a Nobel Prize for economics back in 2009. She was born in 1933, and so she's working with economic theory in an interdisciplinarian way that is critical of this position of Hardin's, okay? And so where she's critical of it is that we will assume this competition of resources as being something that is unsustainable, okay? So he automatically has this assumption, and she's saying, well, what happens if we don't automatically have that assumption and we draw a different conclusion? In other words, people will work together, okay? So in other words, she had experience while she was working in Los Angeles, understanding the finite resource of fresh water and how to work with that in a communal, emplaced way. In other words, understanding the specificity of the context is going to inform how it is that people are working together in terms of the finite resource, say in this instance of the fresh water, without the assumption that we are automatically going to just work against each other, okay? Which is the assumption that Garrett Hardin makes. So we there see that it's no longer this problem of conscientiousness, because there the assumption with Lynn Ostrom is that people can work together. People can be communal in an interdisciplinarian, as interdisciplinarians, okay? In other words, we could bring together economics, philosophy, ecology, in order to, and the specific emplaced way that we are in the environment, to start understanding our way that we're working through finite resources that bypass the problem of overpopulation as Garrett Hardin positioned it, okay? So what I'm gonna do is link you to a podcast. I found this really cool podcast by this guy named Tim Hartford, where he talks about what I'm proposing here as well. He doesn't connect it to COVID. That's my connection. So I want you to think about it in terms of the COVID problem, in terms of economics, but likewise, I want you to see how this depletion of resources is important too, because in terms of a creative, communal, emplaced way that Lynn Ostrom is proposing, which I think is a counter argument to the Hardin argument, and one that looks like it's more sustainable. Okay, so I'm going to draw your attention to a podcast and a few papers as well, and then we're going to start doing some work with these issues this week to see what ethical conclusions we can make and how we're connecting this to the COVID pandemic. So it feels like the wind wasn't too loud and we didn't have too many distractions as far as traffic. So thank you, and I'll get to more details as we continue, and you have a good one. Thank you, class. Bye-bye.